Yeah, I remember the Nebula situation kind of. What was that
That
about?
was rough.
Seemed like someone was basically a certain streamer or a couple were trying to basically have you removed for your Israel stance.
Yeah, it was the
And you
usual.
did you
Mhm.
leave, like, in anticipation that they might boot you or, like, how that kinda or
No.
they wanted you to make some kind of PR statement or whatever?
Yeah, that was the latter. So it was the usual crowd. But yeah, so I after October 7th, came out very strongly on the side of Palestine and opposed to the Israeli genocide, which is the most blatant genocide in modern history. I don't think there's any argument to be made there, really. But of course, when you're working with a public-facing company and your name is attached to them, they're like, "Well, we need to mitigate our message here a little bit. We need to make sure we're not seen as taking a strong stance on this." I'm like, "I'm me. Like you guys are your company." But they were really wanting me to make like kind of a both sides statement. And so I was like, I don't want to do that, but if it'll make you feel better, let me talk to the PR person and we'll see what she has to say." So I talked to the PR person and we went back and forth on some wording of like a tweet for like, I don't know, a few days, a week, something like that. I'm like, "Man, this sucks. I'm not going to do this." At one point I'm just like, "I'm sorry. Thanks for your time. I'm not going to say this stuff." And so I had another call with the CEO and he was like, "Well, if, and he beat around the bush, like, he was gonna kick me to the curb, but he wanted me to, like, like, "Oh, you can't fire me, I quit," kinda thing. So, but we talked our way to it, and I'm like, "You know what? Yeah, if you want this to be the end, it's disappointing." I was the 6th person to join Nebula. I was there at the beginning when it was just standard.
Yeah, that was, like, known as bread tube fucking central. Like,
Yeah.
there used to be a whole meme that, in order to get sponsored by Nebula, you'd have to say the word systemic.
Which is funny because it turns out they're a bunch of liberals.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what they are.
which
It's like, leftism is boils down to basically, like, the post-colonial analysis of Harry Potter. Like,
Yeah, yeah, and don't get me wrong, there are some lovely people still with Nebula. Like,
yeah,
there's some people that I respect that are there because of financial reasons. Obviously, it's a tremendous resource. Like like Getty Images and stuff like that, like the stock footage stuff, the thumbnail services, all these things. That's great. Hard to leave, especially when you're doing lefty stuff that's hard to get sponsors for on your own, or at least vaguely lefty. There's some names that I won't mention for
mhm.
privacy, but
You're listening to One Dime Radio. Become a patron at patreon.com/onedime to support the show and get access to extra content.
We think that ideology is something blurring, confusing our straight view. Ideology should be glasses which distort our view. And the critique of ideology should be the opposite. Like you take off the glasses so that you can finally see the way things really are.
When you talk about a revolution, most people think violence, without realizing that the real content of any kind of revolutionary thrust lies in the principles and the goals that you're striving for, not in the way you reach them.
Philosophers call someone a relativist, by which they mean it's a person that holds that any view is as good as any other view. My simple response to that is this: no one holds that view. No one believes that every view is as good as every other view.
Welcome to One Dime Radio. Today, I'm here with JT Chapman. He runs a YouTube channel, Second Thought. Many of you are probably familiar. Although I have a kind of mixed audience. Some people I notice when I look at the stats of my audience. I have some people who are a bit younger, then I have some people who are quite surprisingly like 35 to 50. And those people might not be as familiar with JT, but JT might be his Second Thought might be the biggest leftist channel right now, is it not? Like subscriber wise?
by sheer numbers of subscribers, yeah. By name recognition, I wouldn't say so, but yeah. And if we're talking just sheer number of people who've clicked the button, then yeah, that's me for better or for worse.
Right. Yeah, name recognition is probably ContraPoints, and then sheer subscribers, you. You also, of course, run the Deprogram podcast with
Hmm.
Yugopnik and Hakeem. I've been on there. That was a lot of fun. And
Hmm.
yeah, we've collaborated a few times.
A number of times. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did the one episode on Second Thought, or was it two? Did we do two? We did one for MMT.
Mhm. MMT
Yeah,
automation.
the automation one. That's right. Yeah, that was fun. And then a couple times on Deprogram now, right?
I think once on Deprogram.
Once on Deprogram. Yeah, yeah. You gotta get your come back for your second challenge coin. Yeah, that was our first episode was fun.
I think that would be a really fun episode when my book is out. I would love to do that.
Oh hell yeah, absolutely.
But
Yeah, you know where to find us.
anyhow, JT, you have a very strange, bizarre story as like a content creator who makes like socialist videos. You used to make like these mass appeal videos that had nothing to do with socialism or politics, just like very like popular videos that you just click on and just I don't know.
Slop.
Yeah.
You can say it. You can say slop.
I remember I've seen you pop up in my recommendations like, way back in the
Mm-hmm.
day sometimes. It would be like, What do we do with all the mosquitoes?" Or about, like, what would happen. It was just really random topics, and I think sometimes
Yeah.
you would also do car videos. That was more like a whole different thing.
Mm-hmm.
But just, like, I remember when I saw your pivot, and I think it was during COVID when you started making
Mm-hmm.
socialist content, and it would just happen really fast, and I started watching some of your videos, and I was like, "Wait, is this the same guy?"
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah, it was
that
a
switch,
yeah.
that's the first thing. It's like, how did you what made you wanna switch that content? Because it's not exactly like not exactly the first thing people would think about when it comes to how to make a lot of money. It comes,
No.
let's make socialist content."
Yeah, let me shoot myself in the foot real quick. Yeah, that was fun, getting approval for that pivot from my wife. I because terrified her the first time when I left Best Buy, but I'm sure we'll get to that. But yeah, I switched March 2020 is when I dropped that first video, Capitalism and the American Pandemic Response, or something like that. And it's because, like a lot of Americans, I'd started to go down the lefty rabbit hole circa Bernie's first campaign for president. It quickly outpaced him, like, oh, this guy's actually just a social democrat. Okay, what is actual socialism? And then on and on and on. Lenin, oh, this works, yeah. And then so I'd been doing some reading over the years where I was running my channel and producing the slop, the general interest kind of infotainment stuff. And come March, after I don't know how many people had died of COVID, and like looking at different countries' approaches to, locking down, making sure people are taken care of, food deliveries and stuff like that in Vietnam, I was like, okay, I'm going to make one video exploring why our response was so bad, how it relates to capitalism, stuff like that. If it tanks my channel, I'll go back to Best Buy if I have to, but I need to get this off my chest. I need to use my platform for something that I see as more useful than asking what would happen if we killed all the mosquitoes, which was the last video of the slop era before I made that pivot. And to my surprise, it performed really, really well. People were interested. I mean, I lost maybe 10,000 subscribers the first day after release or something like that, which is, a big deal. But at that point I had 750,000 subs, so, it was inevitable that some people were going to leave. But after that, growth kind of really picked up, views picked up, and I was like, okay, I enjoy this a lot more, feels more meaningful. I'm going to keep doing this. And so over the next few months and years, I kind of shed not all, but a lot of my previous audience that I had built up and replaced them with people who were interested in socialism, or at least in politics in general, the economy, stuff like that. Definitely really, really glad I did. It was nerve-wracking at the time, but now it's more fulfilling for sure.
Well, I'm curious who radicalized you because you seem to be radicalizing a lot of people. So who
Mm,
radicalized you? And that's a strange experience to be kind of learning about this while creating, because I assume that, like, it wasn't like you watched a couple things and you're like, I have the answers now. I'm gonna go
mhm,
teach
mhm,
everybody. You're
mm.
probably just still in the process of learning stuff, and probably still are, like all of us,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Always will be,
Be
yeah.
learning, yeah.
Mhm.
So, I mean, what were some things that kind of changed your thinking? Was it just seeing the response to the pandemic, or was it like particular videos, people, perspectives, thinkers. I mean, like,
Yeah.
or maybe even like moments.
Ooh. So mostly it was I had been doing some reading. Like I foolishly started with the Communist Manifesto, I think, when I started getting interested in socialism itself. It's like, I'll go to the source. I'll go to the. And so, as most Americans do. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool, I guess, but it's kind of boring. It doesn't say all that much. And then I read some Engels, early on, I attempted Capital Volume 1 before I knew what I was getting into. And that was super dry. Read some Kropotkin, read some Lenin. Funnily enough, when I had tried Kropotkin after Marx, and I was like, oh, this is so refreshing. And I think I tweeted something to that effect. It's like, oh, this is such a nice read. And Hakeem is in my mentions immediately. He's like, oh, I'm so glad you enjoyed it. You should try a bunch of ML works. I'm like, okay, because we had, talked about working together before on a video. So I started doing, I think I read State and Revolution after that. I'm like, oh, okay, this makes sense. And then that was when it clicked for me, because Lenin was such an accessible writer, to me at least. And he was so sassy, which was the fun part. I really enjoyed kind of the polemic aspect of it. So that was a big part of it. Stuff like Parenti's Yellow Lecture and then Black Shirts and Reds.
That
and
yellow
stuff like
Parenti lecture, that's the legendary lecture.
That's the one. If I could give people, if I had to take one thing with me as part of my radicalization toolkit, that would be near the top of the list, because it's just so useful. I
recently had Christian Parenti on my pod, who's his son, and he's a
Oh,
scholar. And
yeah,
you should have him on the program. He's a really, really interesting guy.
that's a good idea. We should reach out.
And to be fair to the anarchists listening, right? If out of all the anarchist thinkers you could read, like, Kropotkin's one of the better ones, I think, especially Mutual
Yeah.
Aid. I still think Mutual Aid's a fantastic work. Like,
It's a very good work, yeah, and I have a lot of respect for my anarchist comrades. Like we may not agree on everything theory-wise, but like they're the ones often on the front lines at protests and stuff, doing medic stuff, making sure everyone's got water, all that sort of thing. So that's really cool. So yeah, that's no shade there for sure.
yeah, you were in the process of recalling some of your moments
Mm,
or things you read or just people you watched,
sure.
whatever, that kind of what was it were these turning points, you know?
Yeah. So I worked at Best Buy. I got married at 22, right out of college. I know, you know what? I'm a big wife guy. I'm the biggest like marriage stan. I think it's very wholesome and it's made me very happy. To each their own, but
I
works for
agree,
me.
but
Uh,
married, but I agree.
hey, there we go. But Best Buy was humiliating, and I think anyone who's worked retail can attest to the fact that it just sucks. It is soul crushing. I would go in with my dinky little uniform, my blue collared shirt with my name tag, and I would walk like a caged animal around the camera, like the Sony camera section all day, because I was the Sony expert. And I'm not supposed to sell Canon, not supposed to sell Nikon. I'm supposed to direct people specifically to Sony. And so if people were there for another brand, I have to be like I can try to sway them, but mostly I just hand them off to we've got the Canon expert and the Nikon expert. So most of the day, I'm like polishing lens cases. I'm like making sure the lenses are all retracted when people come and mess with them and zoom them out and stuff. And it was just like day after day, people coming in, disrespecting you and like just treating you like garbage because you're a retail worker. And I was like, man, this really sucks. And so that for me, I think was part of the radicalization process, being treated like that. And I know people have it way, way worse, like comparatively, but still, it was one of those things. I was like, okay, this is alienating. It's humiliating. It's degrading. What's the deal here? Like and we got to talking, my coworkers and I in the camera department, because technically it's a different brand than Best Buy. We wear the Best Buy colors, but it has the Sony branding as well on the shirt, or the Canon or the Nikon. And so we got to talk. It's like, man, they don't know anything. Like the GM doesn't know anything about cameras. He's pushing us to upsell everybody or give them the credit card that they don't need. I'm like, this guy just wants to take pictures of his kids. Like I'm not gonna sell him an $8,000 camera package. He doesn't need that. I'm gonna give him what he needs. And so we're like, okay, so why don't we have any say in how the workplace is run? Stuff like that. The workplace democracy thing really got into my head. And then after a while, a buddy of mine offered me a position as an inside sales rep at a software company. And I was like, oh, I can sell cameras. I can, sell software to people over the phone. Boy, I tell you what, that was up on like the 15th floor of a building near Dallas. And I would every day, the terrible workplace, they fired the guy who was training me like the day I got there. And so I was just left to my own devices, no idea what to do. And every day I'd walk over to the window and I'd look down, I'd see the boss's nice F-150 Raptor down in the parking lot. I'm like, I bet if I jumped, I could hit that thing. I bet. It was not a fun experience there. Like, I'd pick up the phone and I'd pretend to call people because I'm like, who am I supposed to call? Like, where they gave me no information. So eventually, during this time, I was doubling down on my YouTube production. I was doing 2 a week. This was back in the slop era, and eventually, thankfully, one of them popped off big time, and that was the NASA video. It was like, what if NASA had the U.S. military budget? And I went from, I think, 8,000 subscribers to 75,000 subscribers in like 2 days, something like that, something nuts. And I was like, okay, if I keep pulling numbers like even remotely close to this, I will be able to scrape by. Like, I wasn't making big money at the time because, one video, whatever, 2 videos, whatever. You need to sustain it for a long, long time. But I ran it by my wife.
Ad revenue does not make nearly as much money as people
It's
think it
peanuts.
does. People think
Yeah.
YouTubers must be so rich, and it's like if it wasn't for Patreon,
Yeah.
people just would not be surviving. It's like you make
No
not
way.
that much ad revenue, and it's taxed too. So like,
Mhm.
and there's
Yeah.
it's not that easy to because I mean, YouTube takes us so much of it, right? I
Mhm.
mean that's the
Like
whole-
what, 60%? Something like that?
something like
It is an inhumane cut that they take, but they're the only game in town. But
pay for employees if you want to, expand.
yeah, which is what I've done. It's so for anyone who's interested in like the business side of it, Second Thought makes me no money. None. Like, in fact, it is a drain on the business. The only thing that keeps us afloat is other projects like Deprogram, which is split 3 ways, but thankfully we have, a lot of patrons there. We got a lot of patrons on Second Thought. We've got now First Thought, where we take one advertiser, which is pretty cool, and we like them. But yeah, like, I have to pay for 2 full-time employees on my team, and they are, they're fantastic, and I have to make sure that I pay them fairly for their labor, which is critical to the channel's success. And that is, paying people fairly, you find pretty quickly that is expensive. It's very expensive. So we don't, like, I've never taken a raise for Second Thought. The only, like, the extra money I spend every year goes to giving them raises, which is as it should be. Like, I'm the host. I help with the writing these days, and I help with some like setup stuff. I do the camera work myself, but other than that, like, my team is what makes Second Thought so cool. But yeah, it's incredibly expensive just being a YouTuber in general.
For sure. So like now you're at this point making these mass appeal videos and you have this skill set, this camera skill set, which I think is underrated. Like that is the skill set. I mean, I only recently used it. And even only just in my upcoming video, do I actually use the
Mhm.
camera properly? You'll see in my
Hey,
next video, it has like a kind of Johnny Harris-y sort of
nice.
aesthetic going, and that took a lot of like learning about lenses. This is for me a
Mhm.
foreign language. I'm technologically not sophisticated at all. I'm mentally
Yeah.
like 80 years old. But yeah, so you have those skill set. But what were the moments leading up to the kind of mindset change? The change where it's
Mm,
like, okay, well, I not only am interested in this
mhm.
socialism, but I
Mhm.
need to, tell the world about this. And
Mhm.
what
Sure.
what triggers that?
Yeah, I don't even know if I was aware of it myself. I think this happens to a lot of young new lefties where you're reading about it, it seems cool, it seems interesting, it seems hopeful, and then you become, you feel compelled, like, I don't know, it weasels its way into your heart, and you're like, I need to become a radical and change the world, and to do all this stuff, which, part of that comes from being young and naive and not having done all the reading and stuff. You think you can do it by yourself, and I think that was definitely part of it for me. I've thought, I've got 750,000 subscribers. I can do something. That's a little enough snowball that'll pick up speed and become a bigger snowball and stuff like that. I can make a real difference. Which, to I'm often self-deprecating, but I have met a lot of people who have joined organizations because of my content, and that's very rewarding. But yeah, I don't think there was a turning point exactly. I think I just kind of woke up one day. I'm like, fuck this. I hate what I'm doing. I hate the mosquito videos. I hate the time travel videos. I hate doing this. I hate drawing the stick figures. I hate story block stock footage. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to do this forever. Like the channel's circling the drain. Nobody cares about my content because I don't care about my content, and that's something that I think a lot of people don't realize. Like if you're making videos that you don't care about, people will be able to tell. And I was like, what do I care about? And then it was learning about socialism. So I'm like, okay, I'm learning about this. Maybe I take the audience along with me and I tell them what I'm learning about. And that it ended up kind of sticking. So it was more a, not desperation, but a burnout for sure on the content that I was making, paired with what, could be described, feeling like a moral imperative to tell the world about, the truth and the light of socialism. But, that's, it's mellowed over the years where now I'm like, okay, this is important work that we're doing. I don't fancy myself like a revolutionary. I am in that I believe revolution is the only way to free ourselves from the jackboot of capitalism. But like, I don't, I'm not running around with a beret and shouting slogans from a soapbox and stuff. So
Thank God you're not.
I, I know that's part of, I'll go on a whole rant about propaganda and optics if you, if you let me, but
Oh, we
that's one of
will.
my
We'll get
biggest
to
things.
that. We'll get to that.
Hey, there we go. Love it.
Yeah.
But yeah, COVID was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. I was interested in it, and I'm like, this is stupid. Like, just no, why isn't anybody talking about this? Let me give it a shot, and then I did.
Yeah, it takes a lot of confidence to make videos on the topic. It really does.
Or stupidity, yeah.
Well, yeah, perhaps, but so I was into this stuff since probably I was like, I don't know, like give or take 16 or something. It was
Hmm.
really my high school teacher who was calling me a socialist. He was always like, the socialist in the class. I didn't fancy myself a socialist back then.
Hmm.
I had like vaguely anti-imperialist politics due to being half Lebanese. So
Hmm.
like I had a kind of not the certain type of Christian Lebanese. So I had a certain type of Christian. Most of the
Yeah.
Christian Lebanese are cool as fuck.
Hmm.
But yeah, I had a vague anti-imperialist politics, and I liked at the time, I hate them now, but the New Democratic Party,
Sure,
which
yeah.
is like the kind of, I would say it's actually like diet version of Bernie Sanders. It's less than
Hmm.
that, but it was kind of like that. And I was like, I don't know, I think these ideas make sense to me. I mean, why people die on the
Hmm.
street, that's stupid. And
Hmm.
my history teacher, that's the guy. He was like, "This is a socialist in the class. The socialist in the class." He always joke and be like, "The conservative in the class, the socialist in the class." And I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
that's socialism, whatever, sure." So I didn't. That broke the stigma. You know,
Hmm.
that really broke the stigma for me. Which, by the way, this is a lesson in psychology right here. That's why I'm against
Mm.
leftists using the word fascist all the time.
Mm.
I
Hmm.
feel like that could destigmatize a word for some people if they're like, "Oh, well, I'm a fascist. I guess it's not that bad." Well, that's
Yeah.
how the words socialist and communist and Marxist kind of became for me. I didn't have a
Hmm.
lot of thought taboos preventing me from getting into that just because of those experiences. So that's kind of for me. And yeah, but I didn't make content for a long time. One, because I just didn't want to make videos. It seemed like a huge, arduous process. I had a good friend of mine who was a YouTuber for a while who was making content. And
Same.
I kind of was watching him, and he would like never sleep, this guy. So I was
Hmm.
like, I don't wanna do that. And it was my work friends who were always saying like, "You should start a podcast," 'cause it would just be like, you should get these takes out somewhere. But I was like, "That's
Hmm.
stupid." I don't know. It wasn't until actually looking into the existing left sphere, like the nascent RedTube or
Hmm.
nascent
Hmm.
stream world. I think it might have been yeah, you weren't even making that content yet, I don't think. You weren't even there yet. But I was looking at what was existing at the time. I was thinking like right, left, and center, like all of these guys suck.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's just
This is depressing.
it's just really depressing. Like there was a few people I
Yeah.
think were pretty good, you know? At the
Hmm.
time, I remember at the time I watched Peter Coffin. I thought he was pretty good.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh. I remember that
He
guy.
had some good videos, like some bangers
Hmm.
back in the day. I remember I was like, oh, interesting.
Hmm.
But there was just a lot of weird shit, and I just thought like, okay, well the bar is pretty low. I make
Hmm.
videos, I'm stupid.
Can't be that bad. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what got it in for me, I guess. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, like, would you discourage people from getting into content, or would you, encourage people only of a certain type to get in? Because I was thinking for the longest time, we need better propaganda for our side. Our side
Mhm.
sucks at this, and
Mhm.
our
Yeah.
side has no money, and our side looks bad all the time. So how do we get better?
Yeah.
How do we get better optics? All that. But then I thought, like, maybe like it's not good to. Because it is starting this myself, I've saw how time consuming this is. I didn't even start doing
Mm.
this like seriously, really till like the end of last year, like the
Mhm.
Cultural Revolution video, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know what advice you would give when it comes to people
Mm.
who are listening to this and being like, should I start or should I not? Or, like, any tips of advice?
Yeah. So this is like my pet project is figuring out how to get the left unstupid and capable. We are outfunded by the right. We always will be. That's just the nature of the left-right divide. We are out organized. The right is very good at centralizing based on a few core pillars. Racism. We hate poor people. Very easy, and they don't bicker over like super
Ah,
like purity testing stuff.
I would have to disagree with that. Actually, that's changing.
Yeah, yeah,
I think.
that's true. There are
I think you should
yeah,
study the right a lot because there is already with Trumpism is a big
yeah.
shift in the way the right thinks. If you hear Steve Bannon talk, I mean, aside from
You see him
aside
hit the
from Trump
Roman
ac
salute after his CPAC. Yeah.
aside from what Trump actually does, which is none of really like the stuff
Mm,
for the poor, but like Bannon talks like somebody who has a high level of class consciousness. Like, I was really mind blown just hearing him. Like, this, you
yeah.
would not even see Democrats talk this way, let alone
Mm,
Republicans. And he's saying how capitalists, in their interests to lower wages and import indentured servants, they want illegal immigration because it's
yeah.
good for suppressing the level of wages. Which that's Milton Friedman shit.
Yeah, yeah. Some of them have read a book or two. Yeah, it's nuts. But yeah, Bannon's kind of spooky. Yeah, there is a weird, like, the thing about, and I'm going to do the thing that you said not to do. The thing about fascism is at some point you're going to end up with like two dudes. After they've purged everyone else, they're like, okay, blue eyes, yep, same hair as me, yep, same clothes, yeah. Because they eventually it has to carve out all the out groups because it is dependent on having out groups. It is dependent on having the other. And if that is ever not a threat, then fascism loses its MO, its reason to exist. But yeah, as far
That's
as
a feature of a lot of regimes, but not
it is,
but yeah.
it is,
But I get you.
yeah,
I feel your point. I don't think Bannon is
yeah.
fascist. I think he's a kind of right-wing populism, simply with
No, he's just done, like, someone who's done the reading, like Warren Buffett. Like, yeah, there's a class war on, and I'm going to make sure it's mine that wins. Like, there are some of them that are smart. Like, Buffett stays behind the scenes because he doesn't want to be executed. Like, Musk is an idiot. Like, he's a moron. He does not have the class consciousness. He's got money, and he's an idiot. But there are some on the right who know what they're talking about and just kind of keep it to themselves. But the issue, or one of the issues with the left, is the factionalism. We're always sniping at each other. Like, I don't engage with the drama stuff on YouTube, and there are people. Again, no shade to my anarchist comrades, but there are some anarchists that are constantly making like rebuttals to my videos, which is just like trying to tear my channel down. I'm like, guys, we are so far away from, this having to be a concern as to, squashing our beef or whatever. Like, we are so far away from seizing any kind of power. But my specialty is the optics, is the presentation, is aesthetics. Like, I know how to use lights. I know how to use cameras. I know how to set up microphones. I know how to shoot documentaries. My training is electronic journalism and film production. Like, I've been all over the world, some of the most remote places, to shoot documentaries, and I'm good at it. And that is one thing that I know. And the left, for whatever reason, despite the democratization of content creation to the greatest degree in the history of mankind, refuses to use the tools at our disposal to make a compelling product. Like, we just won't do it. We're like, you know what? That's the aesthetic of the enemy. It's like, no, that's white balancing your camera. That's setting up a light. That is, just put a microphone. right there, right out of frame, so that your audio sounds clear and crisp. Because the quickest way to lose somebody is having bad audio.
Mm.
Like you've probably heard before, audio is half the picture.
Oh, yeah.
Like if someone, I will, let's take Blair Witch Project. Looks terrible. It's garbage. Like the video quality is bad, but the audio is good. If that were flipped, no one would watch it. That's just how it works. Like all these little things that you need to keep in mind. It's like, why is my mom not willing to listen to this? Because it sounds like shit. She can't hear what they're saying. They've got old ears, little things like that. So another problem with the left, and, God bless us, we are more inclusive. We are more willing to, overlook if someone hasn't showered, or if someone hasn't shaved,
I'll
things
be
like that.
harsher than you actually on that. I think
You think?
I've been very critical of the left in the past year and a half.
Yeah.
Increasingly, I've seen that is the primary. Like, if there's any time now, which is when you have the right totally dominant, I actually think the thing to do is not suppress difference and
Mm.
fight the right. There's no position because there's no we. Like we
Mm.
don't even
Yeah.
like we have a kind of vague sense, like all of us, I guess, all people on the left are defined on the left by virtue of
Mm-hmm.
not being on the right and not being on the center,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Being against the status quo, not being for the right. But like what that is still ambiguous. And also but we have a sense in which that people still want to gatekeep this thing called the left. And I think, you said inclusivity. I think the left is less inclusive, actually. They're more inclusive, like maybe racially, but even now, is that
Yes.
true anymore? You could say that whether that's true. And in Europe, I think that's true for sure. Europe,
Yeah.
the right is just outright racist. But
Yeah.
in the left, I actually think that is a huge problem. Is like purity fetishing,
Yeah.
purity fetishes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. What I mean here is, like, we are not going to scold someone for making a video with a big old hammer and sickle flag on their wall, or for wearing the aforementioned beret, or for having, non-natural colored hair, things like that, which is all, let me say, fine. But if you're making propaganda, if your goal is to get as many people as possible, shave, shower, do your hair, take down the giant Lenin or Mao head on your walls. Like, there's a reason my presentation looks the way it does. There's a reason I don't have any branded clothing that I wear on camera. There's a reason I don't wear a Slipknot t-shirt when I'm recording. Like, there's everything I do, everything you see in my videos is very, very intentional. That's how it works just in the film world. Everything is there for a reason. Nothing is overlooked. And the fact that, for some reason, people who are inundated with media, who know what good media looks like, who can often identify what bad media looks like, cannot produce even remotely good media, is baffling to me. When we have all the tools at our disposal, you go on YouTube right now and search how to use a camera, how to light for video. There are thousands, literally thousands of videos. You can learn the exposure triangle, which is the key to doing camera stuff, in half an hour. That's 80% of photo and video in half an hour. The rest you're going to spend your whole life perfecting. But like the basics, easy. 2 weeks, you can have a really, really good understanding of how to operate camera, lights, microphone. Better than 90% of lay people. And that is I think the core issue for me, and other people will have different opinions as to what is the core issue of the left. It's like, if you can't get your ideas out there, if you cannot get past people's mental block about socialism bad, or socialist poor, or socialist lazy, or socialist weird, how are you going to win people over? Like, even like the most apathetic person is still, in the West, is still programmed to have a knee-jerk negative response to anything left-wing. So if you affirm that by showing up on camera in a military, like a Mao era military uniform, it's like, okay, that dude's a freak. Validated. The left is bad. If your lighting is bad, if your audio is bad, validated. These people are poor and don't know how to make a good video. Like, I saw Tucker Carlson and he was in a nice, well-lit room. He's wearing a suit. He's like well-dressed, well-spoken, all the things like that. We have no media training on the left. There are some, but a lot of them end up being like Democrat adjacent. Like Gravel Institute was one. They caved. They went a little too Democrat. All the stuff like Vox and Vice, like they're going more and more right wing, or at least not left. So that's
Another issue with the left is wedded to the Democrats. Even the radicals, even the
yeah,
a lot of
AOC.
communists. A lot of
Yeah.
communists will be like, "Don't do it again. We'll scold you. Genocide. But we're still gonna vote for you." And somehow,
Yeah.
just
Bernie, AOC, yeah, all of them. Like you can't cast your lot with these people. You can't change the party from inside the party. Like if you're talking about the Democrats specifically, like there is no electoral path to victory for socialism, except at the local level.
well,
Except at the local.
see, I don't think electoralism is like in itself a way, but we'll talk about this later. But I think
Yeah, it's a useful tool to blunt the worst excesses of
I
capitalism. Is
see it
what
as
it
a
is.
tool to build legitimacy. Because if you can't expect to get elected in some places, unless you're in a situation where the elections are straight up fully rigged.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't reasonably get elected in some places, like in some have a level
Yeah.
of seats, you can't expect to get to power
Sure.
otherwise. And also just building legitimacy. People know who you are. I mean, even Lenin says this, right? In left-wing communism, infantile disorder. Like you gotta
Such a sassy title.
you gotta participate, right? It's not like
Yeah.
you go in, but this is the position even of the older Marxists who like let Marx
Mhm.
himself and Kautsky, like you're supposed to like participate in the electoral system, but always be prepared for otherwise.
Other stuff. Yeah. Yeah, you can't concede defeat entirely in that realm, but the first thing about getting those positions won is convincing enough people to vote for someone who says I'm a socialist in the first place. So, and that's again where the media and the propaganda comes in. Like we are the people. This is what Ugopnik says all the time, and I think it's correct. It's a great analogy. Is we are the people putting up the propaganda posters of this era. Like we're the guys, sticking up the radicalization, the agitation stuff. And it's an important job. Like we have so little time, relatively speaking. Like climate change is a big problem. We can't like dawdle for another 100 years because we can't get radical enough here in the West. Like that's why I have a lot of sympathy for third worldists. But yeah, for me,
I don't, because I think that most of the time just means sitting on your ass. Like I have sympathy.
yeah. Well,
I have sympathy for third worldists in the third world.
Correct. Yeah, I'm not talking about like armchair revolutionaries
Who are
here.
like they'll do the revolution. I can just sit here
No,
criticize all my
I'm far more in the
my own white
and-
proletarians as counter-revolutionary.
yeah, I'm more in the Che camp in that regard. Like we have a privilege to be in the belly of the
100%.
beast. But yeah, to me, it's like, guys, come on, please. And that's why I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, do I need to make a course that I just give away for free? Do I need to go on more podcasts? Do I need to, I don't know what, to help people understand how to make good content that doesn't scare people away, that is sufficiently radical to further the left-wing pipeline? Because a lot of people will try to keep you because it's in their financial interest at the mouth of the funnel. Like they're not going to be radical enough to get themselves demonetized. They're not going to be radical enough to push you down the funnel further to get to me, to Ugopnik, to Hakeem, whoever is the radical one in your particular faction. So I won't mention any names, the streamers, we all know them. That is their MO, is to keep you circling at the very mouth of the left funnel. So that's what we need. We need people who can produce sufficiently radical content with a sufficiently high production value that is sufficiently not scary to cast a wide enough net to get enough people to start the ball rolling that socialism is not a bad thing. That socialism is, in fact, a good thing. That capitalism is a bad thing. And we need to find a way to wrap all this up. We need to do the ideology thing. We need to do the production thing. We need to do the friendliness thing. We need to do the education thing. And that's a lot of work for people who are outfunded, outorganized, outspent, and have 100 years of propaganda at least to work against. That is a real challenge. And I'm still figuring it out.
In your view, what does sufficiently radical mean? And the question is also why? What for? What is the funnel you speak of? Because I want to also add a little caveat here.
Mm-hmm.
this is a very distinctly American, Canadian, and Western world problem in the sense that
Yes. Oh yeah.
countries that like it's been difficult to even make socialism popular, especially America. Canada
Mm.
actually is more popular, quite more. Communism
Mhm.
isn't, but socialism. When you pull people on socialism, it's actually way more favorable than America. Than you pull people on communism, it's like super low. But there was a time
Yeah.
in which even in some European countries, communism, and in Africa and in Latin American countries, where
Mhm.
even socialism and communism were actually very popular, but they
Yeah.
became not popular. And we have
Completely
we have
organically.
to but we have to ask that question why that is, right? We have to ask that
Yeah.
question why that is. I find that's something I've been studying the past 2 years a lot. Like, I find France and
Do you
Italy really interesting. 'Cause
mm.
well, especially
Okay, you're talking about in the West. Okay.
yeah, because
S
in the West but also no, also Africa is another case that had, socialist movements.
Mhm.
You know, sentiment's a little different now. I'm
Mm.
kinda
Yeah.
like, we gotta also look at that, like, because there's 2 steps, like, we're in Canada and especially America, you haven't even had the chance to have one movement really. I mean, like, the closest we
Mm.
get I say "you," but I'm also American citizen, so I guess we.
Sure.
Eugene Deb
You wanna
yes,
distance yourself as much as possible?
yeah, Eugene Debs might be the most, like, popular
Yeah.
socialist
Yeah.
party candidate, I mean, unless not including, like, famous socialists like MLK, of course, but, like,
Sure.
I mean, so just there's a lot of things to do there. So I, maybe to simplify the questions here. Okay, so what does
Mm.
sufficiently radical in your view mean, and what is this? What is the point of the funnel? Because of course, I think you would of course accept that like more radical doesn't necessarily mean better in all circumstances,
Mm.
because
Mhm. Mhm. Mm.
Nas boths are radical, right? You know,
In a way, yeah, in a way. What's why I say, like, fascists aren't actually radical. They say they're radicalized, but it's like,
the fascists
you
are
what
radical.
you
It's not good.
yeah, it's like their goal fundamentally is to maintain the capitalist status quo in times of crisis, which is
It
not
is. I don't.
a radical it's not
That is that's
huh?
their well, yes, that is their function. But fascism, no, I have a very different view of fascism. Fascism is socialism's evil twin, or it's communism's evil twin. Because fascism, all of them, they did claim to be socialists, all of them. And there are socialisms of the right that aren't Marxist at all. You know,
Yeah,
it's very anti-Marxist, as we know, like extremely
right,
anti-Marxist. But they
right.
are socialists in the sense that, like, I'm not I'm very loose about the term socialism, and I like to distinguish
Yeah,
Marxist socialism because, like, if people say Sweden was socialist, it was a radical social democracy, I won't
yeah,
object to it. There are, like there's that kind, right? There's
okay. So
there's,
you're
like
very broad umbrella.
yeah, I just like to say there's kinds I don't like, you know?
Sure. Mm,
Mussolini and Hitler, they claim to be socialists. I
interesting.
don't support that. Well, it's in because they also weren't they certainly weren't the bourgeoisie's preferred form of government. Like, they just weren't.
Mm.
Like, especially not in the Nazis' case. It's kind of like
No, no.
they prefer it over an
That's
abolished class, right?
right, and that's the crux of it. It's like when push comes to shove, who are they gonna pick? They're gonna
Right.
pick socialism, like Marxism, or are they gonna pick fascism? Oh,
Socialism
they're
of
gonna
the
go to the
fools.
fascist
Like, that's my
everything.
favorite definition of fascism. It is socialism of the fools.
Mm. I've lost the question. Oh, the
Yeah.
radicalization thing.
Yeah.
So the point, what I would call sufficiently radical, is a recognition that a fundamental rupture with the capitalist status quo is required. We need to move beyond whatever you want to say, move beyond, dismantle, whatever word you want to use. Capitalism has to go. That cannot be any longer the economic base on which any country operates, or the one that I'm living in, for example. That's the one I'm advocating for. That to me is the absolute most essential basic level of it. Like, I believe also that revolution is a critical part of that. This is not, I'm talking a single instance of revolutionary upheaval and violence. Like, that's not what revolution historically has been. It's a process. But, like, for me, the issue I find with a lot of quote unquote lefties is that they're like, yes, we need socialism and we can get that by reforming the system that we have. It's like, No, you can't. You can get to social democracy that way. Like, we've had rough social democracy in the United States ish, one could
I wouldn't
argue, in the
say at all.
past. Yeah,
Social
FDR was trying.
democracy, let's remember, had its origins in Marxism. Like, first
Yeah, and
Marxists,
we've ne-
they all call him like Lenin's part of Social Democratic Party of Russia, and
yeah.
they break over differences, but like what became the difference is really over Bernstein, because Bernstein
Mm,
ended up watering down like the road to communism is just like gradually reforming
yeah.
capitalism, which his break is before it's not with Lenin, it's with Kautsky, because
Hmm.
Kautsky does
Who both
you need
sucked.
well, no, no. See, I think that's a kind of ML dogma, frankly. Like, there's not much
Yeah.
that separates Kautsky and Lenin, other than
When you.
the Marxist stuff about democracy, and his position on the Bolshevik Revolution is probably the one he's hated for, and the war, which he
Hmm.
kind of regretted anyway. But
Hmm.
like, if we understand those circumstances, they're interesting. But in terms of like, I mean, like most of Lenin's most famous ideas he gets from Kautsky, like Vanguard. Um,
Yeah, when you get to the base of it, like most of the schisms in that period were like over a couple of words in the definition of like who's a party member and stuff like that. It's like this guy says you have to have full member or like full activity in the party. This one's like you have to contribute fully to the party. It's like the layperson reading that would be like, there's no difference. But to these people, like this was a critical fundamental difference. But so to me, the belief that there must be a dismantling of capitalism and a replacement of capitalism with socialism, with a goal of moving towards communism, which is an advanced stage of socialism, classless, moneyless, stateless society, that to me is sufficiently radical. Anything less than that, and we risk getting co-opted by, progressives or whatever that the Democrats will eventually try to, well, they probably won't, but there will eventually be some kind of socialist party in the United States. Like we saw an attempt with the People's Party with Cornel West and all those people. And like, what happened to that? Where'd that go?
fuck,
Right back into the
beans.
Democrats. Yeah, yeah. So that's the thing. So it's if we're not sufficiently radical, nothing will come of it, and that is the entire point of the center left establishment is to co-opt genuinely progressive language and absorb that radicality back into the fold where it's not actually challenging power.
You mentioned a socialist party. I think
Mm,
there's a very powerful wisdom we can take from Debs and the Socialist Party of America and one of his approaches, which is kind of start with the position of revolutionary reformism, but always prepared
mm-hmm,
for revolution. Because, he actually cites the American founding fathers like Jefferson using that
mm-hmm,
logic to legitimize that, which I think is very clever, especially in American instance.
mm,
It's actually very true to in many ways what they said, maybe not in the way they expected, but in the way they said, which is, you know, y- America is one of the only places where this got actually taken out of the Constitution. But the American founding fathers,
mm-hmm.
like Jefferson, who wasn't there to create the Constitution, but
Sure, yeah.
he's one of the more radical ones at the time, anyway. And they believed in the idea of right to revolution against a tyrannical, unjust government. So if you
Mm-hmm,
have no ability to, reform the system, and then revolution's legitimate. And I mean, American presidents would say stuff like this for quite a
mm-hmm,
while. Like, Kennedy, of course, says peaceful
mm,
reform makes revolution inevitable. I want
mm,
to
yeah.
say that, like, because of course, why would anyone want revolution? It's horrible. You ever watch that Civil War movie? It's horrible. It's like you only want it
Yeah,
if your people are forced, and if like the
yeah.
people are forced to, it's like so. I think that position, which is like starting from the kind of like the idea that you do want, however you get to power, the point is to transition a new society.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
like if that is not an option, well, how are people
Mm,
supposed to make their voice heard?
mm,
Right? But like if you start with the position of revolution, this is why I'm skeptical. That's just like my opinion. The kind of CIA will just destroy the left like they did with COINTELPRO, and now it's way easier with drones and the internet and all that.
mm-hmm. Yeah, like you said, I mean, even like Castro was like, look, the people didn't choose the path of revolution. It was the path that was forced upon them. And like it's all the same. Like nobody ever wants to be like, why am I blowing up a train? Like why in my own country? Like why am I slogging through this jungle? All this, like nobody wants that. That's a shitty thing to have to deal with. It's unpleasant. It's painful, it's economically challenging, all that stuff. You risk getting killed, you risk getting thrown in jail, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it's like, if you're not willing to stand up for a better future for your children, however you can achieve that, what are we even doing here? Like, what's the point? And so if everyone's just going to roll over and accept a gradual worsening, a boiling of the frog, then we've lost. We've already lost. And so the reason I harp on revolution and revolutionary change is more as like a statement of intent, a statement of sufficient dedication to significant change, whether that is done through, traditionally traditionally seen as revolution, pick up arms and, overthrow the tyrannical government, which both the right and the far right and the far left are like, yo, that's awesome. Like the 3%ers and stuff here, their whole thing is like, you only need 3% of the population, that's where their name comes from, to overthrow the government.
Which is a coup, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it all comes down to semantics at the end of the day. Like, this was either a glorious revolution or a coup, just depending on who did it and who did not, and is butthurt that they didn't get there first. So
Yeah, it's like what happens
yeah,
after is what matters, right? Because that's revolution.
exactly.
Like
Right.
most revolutions, in terms of the actual taking power, are coups, but like what happens
Yeah.
after is the revolution, right?
Like, yeah, are we providing for people? Is the water treatment plant still running, or are we exterminating the outgroups? Like that is the significant difference there. Whatever terms you want to put on it, it's like, is this safe for people? Is this, it's going to be probably uncomfortable. Like in the aftermath of every revolution, there were growing pains, or whatever you want to call it, a period of instability, a period of unrest. But yeah, I think we get so into the weeds on labeling things where it's like, I think the average person, give them some credit. Like, they can see, like, okay, my neighbors are being rounded up and deported or black bagged or executed. It's like, okay, bad revolution, stuff like that. I don't know. It's the type of thing where you can speculate about it. You can prognosticate. You can say, it's fit everything into neat little boxes until we're living through it. And I think probably, unfortunately, the revolution we will be living through will be a right-wing one, how things are going at the moment. But I don't know. I just think that sufficiently radical means a willingness to stand up for what you believe is right, and the right will say the same exact thing, and that's why we got a problem brewing.
Yeah, this is why I'm a little skeptical of the revolution thing, because you're big on optics, right? And like, you mentioned people who wear the berets and the hammers and sickles and all that, and some people talk about like fighting protracted people's wars, and it's like the thing about this, right, is like I take the position of generally not pro-revolution, but I'm not anti-revolution. So the people who I would very much oppose, who you probably would too, are the people who argue against revolution from this really weird moral fetish standpoint, which is like, violence is bad under any circumstance.
Yeah.
Really?
We're no better than them. Yeah.
Like, really?
Yeah.
That's stupid. And it's like, you have to be prepared. And it's, I think, though, what you just said there is like the right is going to be the more likely to be violent. I mean, that's what the deep state already thinks. It's funny is the deep state is like well aware that like the right is a bigger threat. Well, maybe not, or depending on what Trump does with it, we'll see. But I mean, the right is far more violent than the left is, and far more extreme right now. Anyone with eyes knows right-wing extremism is a far greater threat. So it's like, what I worry though is that there would be like a kind of civil war provoked by the right, and it would be like the far left who has to sacrifice themselves to fight the far right for the sake of the Democrats. And what I find is like, that's the problem.
What a shitty timeline.
Position. It's like, we will take the ones to beat fascism. It's like, let the deep state fight fascism. That's their problem. They created this. Let the deep state fight fascism. Not sacrificing everyone to the lambs. But like, because I don't think actually most of like the bourgeoisie really want fascism. In fact, I don't think so.
They just want to chill. They just want to keep insider trading. Like, that's their thing.
As it is, because it works well for them.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so when you have these, bombastic people like
Proud
Trump
Boy.
or Bolsonaro and all that stuff, it's like, ah, man, we got to deal with this shit again. Like they just want to chill. They're grill pilled like the rest of us, except grill pilled for them means like yachts and rotating revolving door of lobbying and all that stuff and big bonuses. Hmm.
Revolution. So you mean the revolution of ideas and against capitalism, a social revolution, as they used to call it, right? Why do we
Hmm.
need that? And I mean, I think a lot of people are on board with getting rid of this system that seems to outlived its usefulness, capitalism.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
like, what does that actually mean? If we're being honest, that is actually
Hmm.
not an easy question to answer
No, it's not.
at
I mean,
all.
it's
People debate this
no.
all the time.
Hmm.
What does it mean to overcome capitalism?
Yeah. So I think if you take, and this is going to be another controversial thing that people always bicker about. It's like if you look at what China is doing, I think they're on the right track. You can say it's state capitalism. You can say it's capitalism with, whatever, guardrails or whatever. But I think a strong communist party at the reins where there can be dissent, but they then present a unified front after all the plenary sessions or whatever, where a significant portion of the population is involved at some level with the party, that is a good start. Where the state has control over capital, where you have these guys who run a bank and then they swindle money and then they get sentenced to death. Like that. I'm not saying that we should be doing that. I do, however, think that a state with that kind of power over capital, a state that can subject capital to its own whims, is necessary. Because right now we have, in effect, Elon Musk running the country. That is not acceptable. Something should be done about Elon Musk in Minecraft. Like this, there are things like this
So
this should not happen. Huh?
Teddy Roosevelt.
So like, I,
So what
it's
you mean though is this is like a first step though. This is not like socialism.
yeah, like China's not. You could say China's low grade socialism, right? They're getting there. Even China themselves say, like, when people are like, "Oh, China's not socialist," China's like, "Yeah, we know. We're working on it. We think we'll get there by 2050." Like that to me, I think is a good approach, where it's like they are doing the reform stuff. They are not like immediately shooting themselves in the foot by like Iron Curtain, like no trade, all that sort of thing. We saw what happened with the Soviet Union. China managed to survive. Like they took different paths, and you can debate it. Yeah, you can. Yeah, like markets are not. Capitalism is not when markets, as we all know. But like that's the type of thing. There can be so much debate here. I'll leave that to the economists, the trade side of things. But to me, like the average person should be taken care of. There should not be homelessness in the richest country on earth. Like these are all like very easy Bernie talking points. Like this is stuff that everybody should agree on at this point. You should not go bankrupt paying a medical bill. Like one job should be enough. Like you should have housing afforded to you at least at very low cost, something like that. There should be public transportation. The urban sprawl should be eliminated, things like that. Commie blocks were great. Very good, very well designed. But yeah, it's like all these little things that add up to yeah, like we're not talking like we don't have to have
Well, these are like primary
this
contradictions, right?
yeah,
Like,
which is why it's so difficult to overcome.
well, I think the
Yeah.
primary contradictions are the easier thing. The harder thing is overcoming capitalism. No one's
Yeah.
it's not very easy to do that.
Yeah, which when then you get back to the question of reform versus revolution, reform and revolution, when the time period involved,
But also like what you
the
do
hmm.
in power, like that's extremely difficult. And under what
Yeah.
are the conditions, right, or whatever, right? But
Yeah.
I'll say I'm with you on the practical idea of like with the goals for socialism, which in the sense that
Hmm.
like, okay, at the end of the day, if you don't care about just like helping people, I mean, I don't care
Yeah.
that people say, okay, well, but they didn't abolish commodity production. It's like, okay, I care if people were lifted out of poverty first. We
Yeah.
have homelessness,
Yeah.
but like, I will say this, but I don't think any of that is necessarily like a new mode of society. Like in the sense,
Sure.
China. I mean, I think China is like I view China the way I view a social democracy in the sense that they
Mm,
are able to balance aspects of capitalism, a lot of capitalism, in fact, but
mhm.
with heavy state planning and efficient planning to direct where investment goes and to sure that
Yeah.
is actually working for people and not just billionaires. But I don't see that as like a new mode of production. So like this is where I kind of I am pretty sympathetic to like recognizing China's successes and all. But
Mm,
it's like this is like the basics, guys, right? Like this should be
mhm.
part of like the basics, like dealing with these problems. But then after it's like socialism.
Mm.
I mean,
Yeah.
because like you can say that China, okay, whether or not the party is transitioning to communism by 2025, it used to be
Mhm.
23, used to be 1990, change
Mhm.
a lot. We don't know. I don't know what's in Xi Jinping's head. Maybe they are trying to move to socialism, but maybe it's a different kind of socialism from Marx. Who knows? We'll have to see. That's China, right? That's China. But what do we do?
Yeah.
What do we do,
Yeah.
right? And it,
What yeah, if we had that answer, we'd be set.
yeah, of course. Well, I
But
mean, it's like this is what I think we should think about, right?
mm,
Because like when it comes to, I am critical of the idea that like a party with a monopoly on power is just gonna want to
mm.
give it up.
Well, that's what we have in the United
I
States.
know, of course.
Yeah.
But what I mean is like, you know,
Even if we count it as comparing apples to apples, like, in a sense, but if the
that's what Mao feared about his own party. That is what in
yeah,
China. I just think that the parties happens to be competent and honest.
sure, yeah. That my thing with that is like, all right, so say they're, people are like, "Oh, China's no different than the United States."
Oh, I
Okay,
don't.
can we do it?
I never say that.
Yeah, I'm not saying that you're saying that, but that's it's a common thing. It's
That's
like, "Oh, China's just capitalist." Yeah. It's like, "Okay, let's do the China thing. Let's do it better. Let's do capitalism better the way they're doing it." Like, "No." Okay. Then like I don't know. I just
Well, I do want to say like when I say doing America doing China,
mm,
like doing what like China, like building
yeah.
trains or surveillance,
Literally,
because America
that's the
already
yeah,
does
so I don't yeah.
surveillance like China.
Yeah, it's just
Oh,
not it's
like
just used to, like, tremendously shitty ends, like selling you more Funko Pops and stuff
because
versus
there's some
actually
things that America is like China and some things that's not. It's not like China in terms of building trains fast, but it sure as
No.
hell is like China in terms of mass surveillance, and that's something
Yeah.
I don't think many Americans like.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So this brings us to the question of American socialism. Do
Mm.
you believe in the kind of vision of like a more like there is a model for every country should to follow, or will like different countries follow their own path to socialism? And if so, like what is uniquely American about American socialism? Like, do you think will have to be done that's different from past socialisms?
That's a good question. I mean, it's tough because the United States is so big, geographically diverse and stuff. China is too, but they managed. But it's like you have groups like the ACP, and I'm gonna get flack for this now, that are trying to do the whole patriotic socialism thing, which wraps up ideology of westward expansion of manifest destiny into the socialism thing. It takes the 50s aesthetic of the dad and the boy grilling in the backyard, white picket fence, dog, that sort of thing, and tries to marry that to vague socialist ideals, which generally just ends up being Mussolini light. That is not the correct approach, coming from some YouTuber, but I think socialism has to develop on its own time, on its own terms, depending on the specific material conditions of the country in which it arises. So like Thomas Sankara's socialism looked different than Castro's socialism, which looked different from Mao's socialism. So as the American socialism, if the United States exists as an entity, the way that it does today will look different from those, I think, if we can achieve it. Some people think the US will have to balkanize in order to have, socialist mini states like what they call it, Cascadia or something, where you've got like
Let's
California and Oregon.
not try to scare the normies. So that okay, like let's say if there isn't a USSA, a United Socialist States of America, let's just
Sure.
say it's just a bunch of socialist republics, because like it was, I mean, America just was a bunch of states.
Yeah. Hmm.
So that's not like too far off, right?
Not unheard of. Yeah, sure.
Let's say and, you live in the one which is most likely to be its own state, Texas.
Mm,
Where I mean, like, the Texas Socialist the Texan Socialist Republic or the Socialist Republic of Texas. I mean,
yeah.
I take the kind of disposition that, like, you're gonna have to adapt to the cultural conditions, not just the socioeconomic conditions,
Hmm.
because of the
Sure.
cultural of that area. I mean, like, you're not for the I get the
Mm,
ACP approach. I
yeah.
mean, what would you think is necessary to, like, have socialism in these areas? Because, like, clearly you don't like, you don't think, just asking, that you can just be like, Soviet style communism? Let's do that here. Come on,
Yeah. No.
fine.
No. Absolutely not.
Down
We
the
got
road.
Texas. We got y'all. We got yolidarity. Yolidarity is what it is. No, you gotta. There's, the common tired phrase is meet people where they are, which to an extent, sure. You can't be like, oh, you're racist? Cool. That works. Yeah. We can fold that into our socialism. No, it doesn't work like that. But there is, like, you have to some extent, respect where people are coming from. Like, if you're coming from a deeply religious part of the South, for example, guess what? That's probably going to be part of that group's conception of socialism. You want to fold in, what's it called? Something theology. Help me. Thank you. Liberation theology. Yeah, fold that in. That's cool. Like, I think the Soviet suppression of religion was a big old mistake, and I think somewhere like the United States, especially in the South, it will have to be folded in some capacity. And frankly, there are a lot of churches that I've seen that do the socialism thing kind of well. There are a lot that are,
I always tell my
yeah,
leftist friends, like, especially the Catholics, actually.
yeah, not the like the Gen Alpha like Crusader fan cam ones, but like the actual, yeah. I've known Catholics that are like,
Back in the day, the Catholics were more opposed to socialism and the Protestants were more warmer, but now it's like the opposite. The
it's funny how it
Protestants
flops.
are super reactionary, and it's like have the Pope is saying like, well, maybe capitalism is not the best.
Maybe just a little socialism. Yeah.
But it's like Christianity
Yeah.
is socialist. It's not Marxist, but it's socialist.
Yeah, this brown guy beat the shit out of the moneylenders, and like he's told me to sell my stuff and follow him, and he's feeding the poor, and like that's why I'm like, yeah, conservatives would execute Jesus on the spot if he came back. But it's like, yeah, there's no whatever it takes to get people to the point where they are caring for their fellow man. Fine, like, well, whatever. We can it's not like there's going to be a magic switch that flips and now we go from, all right, we're socialist now.
Mm.
No, it's a constantly evolving process where, like, we're grappling with how things were before. We're grappling with what people think now. We're grappling with faith. We're grappling with the mindset shift of moving to a perhaps different mode of production, or at least having some form of economic democracy in the workplace where that hasn't really existed before in the United States, and that'll be a tremendous mindset shift for people. It's like, wait, who who do I report to? Stuff like that. It's like, of course, oh, I elect this guy. I don't like this guy. Can we boot him? And there's going to be all sorts of problems with it, but it's a work in progress. So, like, socialism in Texas will look way different from socialism in Vermont or whatever in California. California's never going socialist. I tell you that right now. They're more reactionary than Texas. But yeah, I don't know.
Elaborate on that. I agree with you, but that's not a popular take. Actually, I think left would find that odd. Why do you think that? I agree with you, by the way, but I want to see if we have the same reason why.
Yeah, so I've been to California a number of times and the Pacific Northwest. And without exception, the kinds of racists and reactionaries I find there are far more gross and rabid than the ones in, say, Texas or Alabama or South Carolina. And that's, of course, anecdotal. But I've found that there is a particular kind of nastiness in a place where you get to put the laurel on yourself of progressive, where you say what you are doing is for the good of XYZ, like a group of people. You pat yourself on the back for being so forward thinking. But if this, I don't know, it's in Texas, for example, a racist is still a racist, but at least they're like not sneaky and vindictive about it, which is similar to the gripe I have with the liberals. It's like, I'm not saying liberals are worse than conservatives. Like Malcolm X said, you know what the conservative is up to. He's,
Because that's
yeah,
what keeps them left wedded to the Democrats is like, oh, we don't like the
I think
Democrats,
that's part of
the
it.
Republicans. And it's like, and it's in
Yeah.
America, they've switched sides all the time.
Yeah. I mean, the lesser evil thing is just a tremendous roadblock and it needs to be destroyed. There is no lesser evil. But like the point is, I know a conservative racist. I know what they're about. A liberal racist, like that's scarier to me a lot of times because say you've got, say you're Hispanic and, your brother is undocumented or whatever. And what do I like? You have to be on tenterhooks with the liberal because they'll smile at you, but then they're going to call ICE. Whereas okay, I'm just going to avoid these Republicans because they're out about their racism. It's like, and it's just different flavors of the same social ill.
Mm.
I think generally speaking, it's a nastier, more insidious form of reaction that has taken root in places like California. There's also a lot of wealth there, like the Silicon Valley stuff. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, I don't. People think progressive means left, and that left means socialist. I think that's a very dangerous way to think. I mean,
Yeah.
the California is just so incredibly capitalistic. Like, and I think a lot of this sort of woke progressivism is often more capitalistic. It's better,
Yeah.
smarter capitalism. It's capitalism adapted for the 21st century. Like
Oh, 100%. The techno-libertarian thing? Yeah.
if you're a racial capitalist, you're just gonna screw your business. Like you wanna hire people of like different groups, and you also want to appeal to people of different groups. You want to expand your market. Like it's out of date to be, believe in like the old
Yeah.
but it's also the phoniness, like the phoniness
Mm.
of Silicon Valley capitalists is that when they try to be
Yeah.
we're so progressive, we hire diversity training, we hire Robin DiAngelo lectures on
Yeah.
how not to be racist.
Right.
They are way more insidious, and they like hoard so much wealth, and they own so much properties. They're also just it's so much more like there's so much decadence, and what I mean by decadence is the
Mhm.
real decadence, not decadence is not trans people 'cause, like
No, no, of course
decadence
not.
is people having like 10
Yachts and mansions. Yeah,
yachts
yeah.
and mansions that they don't need or live in, and this stupid bullshit. Like it's just literally
Mhm.
fall of the Roman Empire. I mean, if you look at like real fall of the Roman Empire, it's pretty
Yeah,
well.
it's truly
Yeah.
dystopian. Yeah, like
And they cover all this
altered carbon
cover
stuff,
all
yeah.
that up with progressive rhetoric, which is what I hate.
Oh, yeah,
So
don't be evil, the Google thing. It's like all that
but
stuff.
we
It's like,
we we
which
should be
is
careful of this term racist too, because that's how they use it. They have this conception of racism that racism is
mm,
it's like a mentality only that you need to
mm,
convince people to not be or be. Whereas I view
mhm,
racism very intrinsic, and I think you do too, like intrinsically connected to class. Like
yeah.
racism is a kind of thing where it's like there isn't just a racist, like someone who does a race in all circumstances.
Yeah.
Like I see racism as a kind of just set of attitudes that get adopted more likely depending on the kind of circumstance. Like it is a set of attitudes, it is a mentality, but it's a mentality that you're more likely to adopt when you're like in living in shit. And you have
Mhm.
some people telling you, well, it's because of this guy, it's because of these people. So these right, yeah. It's like, but then that's not how like the fucking Silicon Valley people think of it. They think it's like you just need to teach people to not be racist.
You just need to
People
be
don't.
you need to have a kind heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, no, man. No. But yeah, that's like the whole techno-libertarian thing, the Musk thing, the Teal thing. It's all deeply evil. And that's until that is destroyed, dismantled, unplugged, whatever, it's going to be such a tremendous influence on that entire region that I don't like. You'd be surprised. A lot of people still see Texas as a one horse town kind of thing where you've got the tumbleweed going across the road, but like Dallas, the DFW Metroplex is enormous. Dallas or Fort Worth is actually the fun fact, the largest city that still votes conservative, but generally speaking, like Dallas, DFW is a very purple place.
Hmm.
Not that it matters, but like it's a modern banking business hub, that sort of thing, and it's I don't know, it's not cowboys and stuff anymore. So when people just talk down on Texans as a bunch of yokels, that's not necessarily the case. It's a pretty metropolitan place.
I mean, and Texas is just like extremely multiracial now. Like you have like super deep South. It's not even deep. No, it's never deep South, but it's like not like this. It's not like the super white place. Completely different. I watched TV show Mo. Been watching the TV show Mo recently by like Palestinian comedian and from Texas and exposed to a lot of there. I thought it was pretty good. Yeah, I like Mo. It's pretty good.
All right, I'll have to check that out. I'm looking up. I seem to remember. Yeah, Texas is now a majority minority state as of 2023. White people are no longer the majority in the population. Yeah. Yeah, people of Hispanic descent are the majority in Texas. And it's like, that's, yeah, to that.
Arabs are
Mhm.
considered white in America, and that's purely like a legal category because when they got there, they're like, they drink from different water fountains? No, no, we want to be with."
They're good.
Like
Yeah,
in
they're good.
Europe, nobody considers Arabs white.
Oh, yeah, absolutely not. Yeah, Europe's their own can of
Yeah,
worms.
y'all have it
Yeah.
easy. I think America's like people think America racism is bad in America. Like now,
I watch stuff out of Germany, out of France. I'm like, what the hell, dude? What the heck?
dude, in France, yeah, third generation immigrant and like speak perfect French, be named as Jacques, not French. America's like give one generation. You're American.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get a black president. I mean, like, I know that girls like to say like that means like, oh, fraud,
Sure. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it does say something. Like, you're not gonna have algae
Sure.
president in France.
No, absolutely not. No. No.
I want to bring back to the ACP briefly. I know you, it's a kind of because well, you mentioned them. I was expecting you to more mention them in the back room because this thing, like, I also am with you that the way they do it is cringe. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, it seems like they just like, here's a bunch of things reactionaries like, let's put it and then put socialism
Yeah.
and then package it. But I'm not against inherently the idea of patriotic socialism because you can be patriotic about some things and be very against other things. Because America, it has simultaneously a legacy of imperialism, expansionism, but also as a legacy of isolationism. For a very long time, America differentiated itself from Europe on the basis that it's not warlike. Like, isolationism was a strong force, and it's kind of returning. In fact, I think it's the big reason why Trump wins is because he pretends to be an isolationist when he's very much not. But, like, that works with both sides of the spectrum. Like, Americans, I actually think, are much less pro-war than people really give them credit for, like, traditionally, and there's many things to be proud of in American tradition, like, civil liberties, free speech, like, being the first country to be founded on ideas, not a race, right? There's a lot of things to embrace in a effective way. I mean, like Martin Luther King, he says he cites the Jefferson speech, all men are created equal, and his thing is not to say like, oh yeah, that's why America is perfect. His thing is like, no, we were supposed to be fulfilling these ideals. We need to actually fulfill them. We need to fulfill the ideals of the American Revolution. We're
Mm,
hypocrites if we don't. So it's
yeah.
patriotic from a stance of not what your country is, but what it could be. That's like I
Mm,
think patriotism is fine. Like, and it's good actually. All socialist movements were patriotic.
yeah. How one Yeah, one caveat I might offer is that there's a difference of patriotism in somewhere that has been colonized or oppressed, say, Ireland under the British, something like that, for example. To be a patriotic Irishman is different than being a patriotic, you know, apartheid era South African, or an Israeli, for example. That anything founded on the core principles of, even if they're not spoken, genocide, replacement, something like that, extermination of the locals, the indigenous populations, then it's harder, I think, to justify patriotism as a critical component of your socialist.
So you should be not proud of. You should be. Say your country sucks.
No, not necessarily. I think, like I said with Texas, like I'll defend Texas, right? Because it's not the shithole people think it is, and in some ways,
Texas, I
it's
think the Texas Revolution has way more baggage than the American Revolution.
yeah. But what I'm
Texas Revolution is what people leftists think the American Revolution is.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, we had our bourgeois revolution. Yeah, I I think it's perfectly fine to be like, I'm proud of this town that I live in. We've got some cool history here. We had the first soda factory in Minnesota or whatever, something like that at that level. But like to enshrine in your movement visuals that are inherently tied to the exterminatory practices of the earliest periods of your country. So, for example, like the westward expansion, manifest destiny, stuff like that, which is often used as kind of the symbolism of these patriotic socialist movements in the United States.
There's separate eras. I just want to add though, like very like the founding and the Manifest Destiny are very separate eras. I odd that today we speak of them as part of the same thing, but they're very separate eras.
Yeah, there was some different things happened to be, to put it
The
lightly.
whole conception of like scientific racism like got invented in the 1800s. Like wasn't there before, there wasn't this conception of that.
Yeah. So I think the core issue is that how do we, if we do believe it is important enough, patriotism as an idea, to marry that to our revolutionary project or our socialist project, if you don't want to use the term revolutionary.
Oh, I think it's fine to use the word revolutionary. I just mean like, the stuff we were talking about, the people are like, yeah, storm the White House.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll go well. But how do we differentiate that? How do we not distance, because you need to grapple with it, but how do you make sure you're not valorizing the elements of, say, American history, American symbolism that are inextricably tied to racism, brutality, genocide? And is it worth it? That is the calculus.
Which parts?
What do you mean? Like, what is
Well, like what parts
what is
do you think are
unacceptable?
tied to that? Inherent.
So I think there's a strong might makes right component to the more gung-ho patriotic socialist movements in the United States. A strong tendency. I don't know.
I don't like the way they do it. I
Ov-
agree with you there, but I mean, like I said, I think the way they do it sucks balls.
Yeah,
But it's
and
like, but it's.
I also don't want
I mean,
to.
also like all the socialists that have succeeded ever managed to kind of, with a rare exception of the October Revolution, but that's also in a civil war in which the government that
Sure.
gets elected continues the war, and that's probably just about the only time you can be like, "Fuck my country." It's in
Yeah.
the middle of a war, like nobody
Yeah.
wants. But like, you know what I'm saying? You're like I'm very skeptical of this kind of idea that like you can't be proud of anything in your country or be patriotic just because there was like genocide and that there were all kind of terrible
Yeah.
things. Because like if we're being perfectly honest, all of Latin America is founded on a certain degree of genocide.
Sure.
Like they're
Yeah.
all settler states, and some of them were founded in far worse ways actually. Like if you look at Argentina, they exterminated all of them. Or you get like
Mm-hmm.
Bolivia, you get our apartheid till like, pretty
Mm.
very recently. And still, I mean, I was shocked just going to Mexico. Mexico is supposed to be like the least racist
Yeah.
Latin American country. And you can see class is literally black and white. It's like
Mm-hmm.
the poor people, you can tell by how rich someone is by their skin color. It's like so
Mm.
night and day, the structural racism there, you know?
I think one of the
So
components.
you
Yeah.
get what I'm saying. But
Absolutely.
like there's also
Absolutely.
there's
Yeah.
also much things to be proud of in the Mexican tradition, like Benito Juarez, or like, you can be part of the Mexican Revolution, even though there's all kind of weird stuff, like they had conflicts with the indigenous people. And You had
Oh,
like all the revolutions have their contradictions, like especially the Bolsheviks. Like
sure.
it's like are people going to they could say like oh the Russian Revolution or even the October takeover is
Mm.
all bad because of like what they did to the peasantry later.
Yeah, we're getting back to like the nuanced stuff.
Yeah,
Like, is this a bad revolution or a good revolution?
I like
So,
to be nuanced
and
with
I
all revolutions.
Yeah, and I think that's important. But I think one thing about the whole patriotic socialism thing, at least in the United States, is like we have to, I think, analyze the premise a little bit. And the premise is that Americans are patriotic. And I don't know that that's necessarily the case, at least for a plurality of Americans these days. I don't think patriotism is a core component of being an American. I think it certainly was up until like Vietnam, maybe something like that, where it's just like, yeah, I'm proud of my country. I stand for the flag. It's better than whatever country. But these days, you ask anyone under the age of like 35, do you believe America is the greatest country on earth? What? No. I just paid $6,000 to have a baby.
Mm.
Like, no, no,
Right.
my job sucks. Stuff like that. So I think it's important that we take a look at like whether that claim that it's important to be patriotic necessarily applies to places like the United States before we go all in like the
Sure.
branding and the terminology and
What
stuff. So
you know what I'm
I
saying here,
yeah.
right? I'm not saying much I
Mm,
don't care very much about, like, the proudness, 'cause it's like, why do you
mm,
be proud of a country? It's like, for
yeah,
me, it's
sure, that's
more
silly.
just
Yeah.
aesthetically, like, trying to make something seem familiar, because if you
Hmm.
bring in general, just at the very limbic psychological level, people are just very resistant to anything that
Sure.
seems too new,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
especially something that seems
For a
has a
time.
pretty bad
Hmm.
legacy in their brain, right? And no amount of,
Mm,
like, trying to say, "Oh, well, actually, it was only this many people died and not this many." It was, 50%
mhm,
less
mm,
than what the numbers say. Like, the fact people are still gonna be kind of at a distance. But when you blend stuff with what is familiar, what is new with what is familiar, it's a very
mm,
powerful thing, you know?
mhm,
Like, kind of say,
mhm.
"Well, actually, it's not" like, I really like your socialism video, actually, Socialism in America, because I actually think you very much overstate the degree to which socialism existed in America, but it was very well done that I damn almost
Yeah.
like I'm like, "Damn, did socialism really exist?" It was really well done,
Yeah.
like, as a piece of just convincing because you're like, "They've been here, we've had socialist ideas," and I mean, that's an element of truth there, a lot of element
Yeah.
of truth there. It's like,
Mhm.
if I was, trying to say to Canadians, right, about socialism, I'd say, "Well, did you know the Conservative Party at one point with, adopted aspects of socialism. They're called red Tories.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
like
yeah.
kind of consensus at one point. We have our guy Tommy Douglas. He's like our
Mhm.
socialist icon. You gotta have your icons. Every
Sure, yeah.
icons like China, what they did before one way the communists legitimized themselves is they would be very big on valorizing Sun Yat-sen.
Mhm.
Like Mao would always
Mhm.
say, they're trying to like go a step, beyond that, but they would always like
Yeah.
valorize Sun Yat-sen. And it's like in Canada, I think we have much less to be proud of, honestly, than the America, even
Mm.
though America did more like imperialism and stuff. We don't have
Yeah.
a revolutionary legacy. We just don't. We got Tommy
Mm.
Douglas. You guys have plenty of revolutionary symbols to co-opt. You have MLK.
Mhm.
MLK? That's a great socialist icon. But even like, look, this one is a little maybe they can't do this one anymore because of the way this reputation's been a little tarnished by certain types of thinking, but, like, Jefferson used to be the one that leftists
Oh, yeah.
valorized,
Mhm.
because Jefferson was the radical of the founders. He was the only
Mm.
him and Paine, Thomas Paine.
T-Pain.
Paine can still be co-opted.
Yeah, you can still use Pain. Yeah, I mean, you can still to an extent. I mean, even if it's just because he's a little bit lesser known, but like his writings were pretty radical for the time.
Very.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and that's it's like the whole I don't know. I'm very hesitant to go all in on any given aesthetic, which I think is my knee jerk reaction to the patriotic stuff. It's like I think we need to cast a wider net than that because if you go all in for the patriotic stuff, you're gonna end up with
Might alienate
chuds.
some people, yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna alienate a bunch of people. You're gonna alienate people like, for example, the most marginalized who do not see, say, the American flag or the founding fathers as things that are good. You don't, you're gonna have people who identify.
I wouldn't assume that actually. I wouldn't assume that. I think that's a trap also. Marginalized. I've in my experience, the proudest people of like America and Canada are immigrants. This is always what I tell
Sure.
anti-immigrant people. Yeah, I
Yeah.
just really believe that as a fact. It's from the experience. People who come from a poor country are so proud to be there, and when they raise,
Yeah. Well,
they're like they like actually like they understand struggle in a way, in a certain sense, and they'll be proud. They'll be trying to adapt. They'll be very eager, like to because like people immigrants really do want to embrace American values because for a lot of people, American values is like freedom, and that's the thing. I think we should like on the left, the purpose is to like actually have those ideals mean something because like in the time we are now in a corporate oligarchy, it's like
that's yeah. What do these words mean? Yeah. 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 Yeah, I mean the base of the Statue of Liberty and all that. Yeah, it's stuff I've talked about in videos in the past. I was like, these words don't mean anything if you don't live up to them. But when I'm talking about marginalized, I'm thinking more specifically like underserved Black communities and stuff, over policed Black communities. Like, there's a reason the Black Panthers existed and were probably the most successful socialist organization in the United States history. It's because they were brutalized by the police, over-policed. The kids were thrown in jail at massively overinflated rates. So they had to take matters into their own hands. They had to do their own educating, their own health stuff, their own like food programs, stuff like that. So those people would not have seen the American flag, American police, all these icons of, whatever you want to call it, American service, civic duty, stuff like that. They would not see those the same way that like a white person.
I would actually very much push back on that. MLK very much like drew on all of that, and MLK,
MLK was not the Black Panthers
but
though.
ML Black Panthers exist because MLK got shot. Like nobody would have went that route if it wasn't for MLK getting shot. Like that route was unthinkable. It was because they decided to make MLK's approach that shut that down. Why people were like, well, okay, we're gonna take up arms, and I don't who's to blame them. They're right.
No, they're absolutely right.
We have to look at the context because look, this is the thing us leftists, many liberals to forget and well, this is the kind of thing we forget about the American Revolution. It's easy to look at like slavery and stuff like that and like racism because it's like, oh, how could they be so revolutionary if they still had slavery in
Mm,
the South? May I add, because they did in the North abolish slavery before everybody did. Most
mhm.
countries did, but it was the South who took so long to abolish it. And after you fight a revolutionary war, it's pretty damn hard to now force the whole South to abolish slavery. I mean, it took like over 100 years for that to not quite, but like took another generation.
Sure,
Yeah,
yeah.
quite a while for that to happen, right? I mean, that's literally Jefferson's reason for why you can't force the South to get rid of slavery, so to provoke a civil war. And I mean, that's what happened, right? Like,
Mm,
because, and people will still say, oh, there's still like racism, right? Of
mhm.
course. And I just want to add, they say all men are created equal. Well, that didn't include Black people. Look, in England, white people weren't equal at the same time. Okay, in most countries where aristocracy still existed, white people were considered like people of different classes were different species. Aristocracy was seen to be a blood related thing. In that if a handsome kid was picked up off the street and was poor, they would assume he was a bastard child. Like this is so like when we look at that historical context, it is extraordinary. It's why like the French Revolution's made possible. And then I see like all of them, like the French Revolution, Haitian Revolution, Russian Revolution. These are all kind of progressions, right? And it's like the goal is to move forward. But it's like that's why I'm very against kind of like saying like, moving it back. Like Frederick Douglass, he also praises the American Revolution, but he much earlier civil rights activist, of course, famously. He says, well, we're not fulfilling the ideals of the American Revolution if we have an extremely racist system. All men are created equal, and even at the time, he doesn't quite consider women, right? all the people like Thaddeus Stevens. It's so funny. All of them, they're like, all the people who are, the part of the anti-slavery, they're like, yeah, slavery is stupid, but like freedom for women, nuh-uh. I mean, it's like progress takes time. It's like what I tell these liberals who criticize Palestinians, saying, "Oh, they're Palestine's homophobic. Look at Israel; they're more pro-gay."
Mm.
And I say, like, they'll get to gay. Okay, right now they're fighting colonizers, right? They're it's the
Mhm.
primary contradictions. It takes a while for like progress to develop, So this is kind of what I say. Like, I really think Americans be less harsh on your revolutionary tradition. Like, really, I see this as a Canadian with some Native American ancestry. Funny enough, I don't think there's anybody who's Native sees a Jefferson statue and it's like, well, but they would be critical, I think, with which is where I agree with you fully in your ACP criticism, is that they
Mm.
uncritically praise all these things. Like,
Right.
they act like, "Oh,"
Mhm.
when you said the risks valorizing, I totally agree. If you are
Mhm.
patriotic and just to, like, appeal to people, well, it's like, how do you why if you're just so proud of how everything is, why would you want people to change it?
Right.
Point
Yeah.
is the legacy, right? Claiming the
Mm.
legacy, saying, "No, we, the socialists, we're the legacy of freedom." What are the
Mm.
Republicans doing? What are the Democrats doing for freedom? Nothing.
Mm.
That's the kind of approach I think.
Yeah, myth building, yeah, all that.
Everyone does it, especially
Yeah, oh yeah, I'm not moralizing there for sure. Yeah,
myths have to be largely true to work.
yeah, yeah, oh, absolutely, and you need a story to tell people, like, without a story, like, why would anyone follow you? But, I think, just to see if I can get this a little bit, we have to assess whether the patriotism thing is really so important. Like, is that the most important thing? Is that the core of our message? Is that the core of how we wanna present ourselves? Or is it, and maybe this is this is the sticking point. Maybe the sticking point is that for the right in the United States, patriotism is just decking yourself out in the flag. It is, crying at the national anthem. It is saluting and saying thank you for your service or whatever. All the things that you're not supposed to do, right? You're not supposed to wear the flag as a garment. That's one of the things. You're not supposed to salute if you're not, if you're not in the military, all this stuff. But they do it anyway because it's the aesthetic that they've chosen. And that is the kind of patriotism that I see being applied to patriotic socialist movements. We're getting to the definition thing here. It's like, is it the aesthetic of the flag and the national anthem and all that stuff? Or is it a radical care for your fellow man within the boundaries of your country? Like that, if that's patriotism, okay. If the patriotism is the aesthetic, we're treading on thin ice there.
100%, yeah. Because if you have the same aesthetic as, like, right-wingers, but without very clearly different substance, I mean, like, what's the point of that?
You're gonna you're gonna end up with right wingers, which is why we see in the cesspool that is Twitter a particular type of person associating with the quote unquote patriotic socialist movements in the United States.
I just call them MAGA communists because it's like they're tailing patriotic social. I don't think we should stigmatize that as a term because
I think that ship has sailed. I think it's gone.
think call itself patriotic socialist. I'm talking about as a description of how it is. Like, what I think has killed the left is this kind of like no one comes to power being like my country is all bullshit. Like it just doesn't happen like nowhere. Like so, what I mean is that it's your government's bullshit.
Yes.
I think this is the difference between a socialist
Sure, yeah.
patriotism as opposed to a kind of like status quo patriotism or a reactionary patriotism. Like status quo and reactionary patriotism loves the country and is proud of the country for what it is.
Mm,
Socialist patriotism is proud of the country for what it could be.
mm.
Like and what it could be has to be based in a reality. And like I think is America primed for socialism in material conditions?
The material conditions, yes.
Material conditions very much. And actually ideologically
Mm.
speaking, this is what's funny. So like
This is gonna be a hot take. All right.
have you read Lewis Hart's The Liberal Tradition in America? Well, he famously asked the question, why no socialism in America? And he's probably the historian most famous for dissecting this question pretty hard. And his conclusion is really, really interesting. This is a guy who studied like so many civilizations. One of his other books is called the founding of new societies. And his to really sum it down, like that, to very simplify it, rather than America not being prone to socialism because it's too reactionary or too racist, America had an aversion to socialism partially because it was too progressive. By progressive in the sense that America is one of the countries that it was felt that the revolution was already achieved. Whereas in France, the revolution was happened, but then it was defeated. Then there's like there's 5 republics. I mean, but like, the Third Republic is an attempt to kind of actually rekindle the ideas after you had fucking Napoleon and all that shit. Yeah, I have so many eras in France and in Europe. Like, it's the proletariat that takes the battle of democracy. In America, you didn't even need the proletariat to do that. So it's like they have
Yeah.
this sense in which it's achieved already. And that's the kind of false
Mhm.
sense. It's a dangerous sense. So like, but that's also partially because it really was more radical than everywhere else. It really was the
Mm.
place that gave suffrage before everybody else. So like, this is the trick here. It's a dialectic. America is both very progressive and also very not. And it's because it's so founded on liberal ideas. It was able to frame collectivist communism as not just like bad or, whatever, but anti American. It didn't
Mhm.
even have to co opt it. Didn't have to really co opt socialism in the way that like Europe,
Yeah.
Charles de Gaulle
No.
at one point flirted with like socialism. Not actually, but he would say, "Oh,
Yeah.
les capitalistes,
Pay lip service.
n'est pas très bon."
Yeah. Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, he had to appeal to it. All the this you had so much tailing of socialism in Europe. I mean, if fascism comes out of Europe partially because of that. America never had fascism because he never had communism.
Mm.
See what I'm getting at here is like a couple things is that there's partially a real revolutionary tradition there, but it depends on how you deal with it. You can just
Mm.
reify that existing status quo if you're just like uncritical about it all. But if you actually try to build on that unfulfilled promise, I think that's powerful. And I think because of that totalizing liberal ideology in America that does not exist in most other countries. Like in France, there's many political traditions: monarchism, republicanism, socialism, fascism, everywhere.
Mm.
America, you have progressive liberals and conservative
Mm.
liberals. It's just all liberal. It's
Yeah.
just like because it's founded on liberal ideas. So, like, I think socialism seemed too foreign to that. And I'm not saying to
Mm.
say like it should just like dilute its substance. And
Sure,
how it
yeah.
comes across, it has to, like, adopt itself to the unique American character, as did all the actually existing socialism. Like
Mm.
China adapted heavily to its context, Like, there's many things very unique, like,
Sure.
rich in the Chinese tradition it has to adopt. Still does to this day, right?
Mm.
Some
Mhm.
people don't like that China adopted Confucianism. They
Yeah.
adopted that aspect of it.
I
Oh,
mean, there's a reason they harp on socialism with Chinese characteristics, yeah, it's
and, these
but yeah,
socialism will
it's
have American characteristics, right?
mm. And I guess that you just get to the core of, okay, what is that? What does that mean? Like, if you could say revolutionary tradition, we've had
Liberty.
one.
So what will socialism in America have to be that it wasn't? It's gonna have to preserve free speech. It's gonna have to preserve different viewpoints.
And what does free speech look like? Because the conception of free speech in the United States right now is just free speech for those with capital and the crushing of dissent.
JT, if you wouldn't be able to exist if it wasn't for free speech. If like I'm being very serious here. Like I learned this. This was a reality check for me talking to some of my Mexican comrades when I went to
Mm.
Mexico. Because Morena is a government that had a lot of progress, and I was fascinated by all these communists who I was talking to. One of them is a very good friend. He's a Discord moderator. Shout out Ernesto. He was on the podcast for an episode. These communists were like they have this very a huge pragmatism, and I was thinking like, okay, why are you guys, why are you guys so like averse to using this symbolism or even calling
Mm.
yourself communist with the capital C? He said, "Oh well, we would be because not too long ago, like we would die. You get
Yeah.
locked up and you just disappear. Like in much of Latin America, Operation Condor shit, you just die. I mean, you have a better luck being a Maoist in America than you do in China. Actually, I just want to say that it's
Mm.
true. And regardless,
Yeah.
I'm not a Maoist, so it's like,
No, me
but
neither.
like I just want to say that is not to be taken for granted. Free speech is powerful. In fact, that's what I think should be protected at all costs because I think Israel has become one of the biggest threats to free speech. And what it's doing, it's
Sure.
actually eroding
Yeah.
free speech. Like this new anti-Semitism bill
Yeah, it's
being
nuts.
floated, that is nuts. So I think, and the
Mhm.
left historically was always the people who defended free speech, and I think it should.
Mhm.
And like, this is Norm Finkelstein is always on about this, right? He's like, even though I hate the fascists, they won't be banned just for being fascists. It's if you try to overthrow the government as a fascist
Mm.
group. Yeah. Well, anyone who tries to overthrow a government's gonna get put in jail,
Yeah.
like in any government, right? And
Right.
not just for
Mhm.
merely having those opinions. So it's like socialism ought to be a little. I don't want to say the word libertarian just because like people think, oh, yeah, libertarian. But like it
Yeah.
will be libertarian in a kind of sense, in that like it'll be about like workers having control and autonomy and more freedom where that doesn't exist today, like
Mhm.
economic free.
Yeah, that's why I harp on the terms like freedom a lot in my videos because that is important, and we do not have freedom the way that Americans claim that we do or think that we do. But again, it comes down to I think definitions, and we have to be very careful how we use the terminology of like free speech stuff like that, which I think in theory is good. But it's going to be a long discussion, a long path there. We're nowhere near having to worry about it, unfortunately.
We sh-
But I
yeah,
agree with
we
you.
shouldn't just be like
Hmm?
defeatists and be like, we ain't got free speeches, whatever. It's
Mm,
like, no, we should actually try to protect that from being eroded. And in fact, like where it's
sure.
eroded most is actually not from the government, it's from corporations. That's where
No, I know
it's
that firsthand.
yeah, I know. Well,
Yeah.
I'm preaching to the choir here
Yeah.
but this is what I mean. I don't see that from a lot of some leftists. Actually, frankly, especially the Marxist Leninists actually,
Mm,
is that I find like this is kind of taken for granted. Like people it is something ironic, to like be like, I mean, like what we do, both of us, is which wouldn't be possible without that,
mm,
and you could say, oh, that's because it's not a threat or whatever. But
mm,
like America had like its socialist parties and communist parties were allowed to exist. They didn't go very far due to a number of factors. But in
mm,
many
mhm,
places they were outright banned. Like they were banned
mm,
in Canada for a while. And they had to have a legal case to actually, have it be legalized. And that was partially due to a court case using free speech, appealing to our constitutional rights, which are actually far less robust than yours, I want to say.
mm,
In
mm,
England, for example, you can actually sue people for libel, like just alone. If I were to say Destiny or I don't know, whatever, someone's a fascist, whatever,
mhm.
YouTuber,
You said his name.
whoever the
You've
fuck,
summoned
I
him.
don't care,
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
gamer, they could
Mhm.
go and say in England, be like, they could sue me and say, oh, well, I'm
Sure.
technically not here and now you owe me a bunch of money.
Mm,
America, it's like, well, speech,
yeah. Yeah, I think to an
powerful.
extent it's yeah, it's a good thing. How I think again, we're just gonna have to be careful with okay, free speech for fascists. You can have those ideas, cool, whatever. You're an asshole, fine. They say some nasty stuff though. Like I think we should exterminate this group. Even that?
But,
Like I don't know.
but this is where in Canada that is that we have hate speech laws, right?
Yeah.
But I'll quote Norm Finkelstein here, which is that, you know, if we say, yeah, let's ban the fascists for things they say, that can be easily used the other way around by left.
But it already is. Like it
It isn't
already
though.
is
It
for
isn't though. At that same level, it just isn't. Like really, there are many countries like where like being a communist is just itself can get you in jail. Now, if we
mm,
even had like let's forget like dictators, let's say wherever kind of liberal democracies, whatever.
sure.
Even in like Britain, you if they wanted to really expand hate speech to say, oh, well, you're saying you want to put all reactionaries in gulags,
Mm,
they could do some legal trickery to arrest people on that basis.
mhm.
They could not do that in America. Now, England itself
Mm.
is already far more liberal than like a lot of countries where it's like, they don't have that legal precedent. Like, there's a reason why Marx left Germany, Prussia, to go to England to finish Capital. It's because he wasn't allowed to write that shit. Germany
Mm.
was being chased by the secret police. In
Yeah.
England, they'll be like, we don't like you, but like we can't really arrest you, I guess. Unless
Yeah.
right,
I'm under no.
try revolutionary shit maybe, but you can at least get the ideas. That's a step,
Yeah.
and it's very crucial because I just want to say, like, with the internet, with all the technology that exists, especially like the deep connection between the government and Silicon Valley and all the military
Mm.
technology, it is terrifying what the state could do.
Hmm.
And like all that stuff we do, all this creation, that could be wiped away in a minute. I
Hmm.
think we gotta uphold that free speech, and we gotta
For the good of our YouTube channels.
you should also have free speech to, you should also have freedom in the workplace. How about that?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's the important stuff.
But
Like,
that too,
whatever.
it's not like that and not the political stuff. It's all of it.
No, 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 no. I'm under no illusions that like state is what's cracking down on like left wing content. It's corporate platforms like YouTube and stuff. Like, there's a reason my video on which one, I don't even remember, one of the police brutality ones, I think, was unlisted, or like was hidden from search results. Like, it showed published and all that stuff, but it was not. You couldn't find it. You couldn't go to my channel and see it even, and that was reported to me a bunch of times. I'm like, so I added YouTube finally. Oh, we're looking into this, all that stuff. It's like the state's not doing that to me. It's YouTube, and but the problem is that the United States is just a bunch of corporations. Like, everything we do, our public sphere is corporate controlled. So, like, what good is free speech if you can't exercise it, if you check those privileges at the door of these, like, the corporate gate-kept public commons, like internet commons?
But it is good though. Like, you have 1 million subscribers. In
Mm.
China,
Yeah,
so I have some viewers from China who had to use a VPN to watch my Cultural Revolution video. Because YouTube's
sure.
banned in China. Internet's
Yeah,
heavily censored, right? Now, frankly, I don't use that to be like, China does nothing good, right? China does some things good. It sure as hell builds trains better. But like, I don't think most Americans like that censorship bullshit. And I think it should be
sure. No,
clear for us, like we should be like we shouldn't have an apathetic stance on free speech. I really don't think we should. Like we
no,
should say that
Americans are too
you're
attached to
right
the.
to say that it's not like with corporations
Yeah,
being hindered, and that should be why we should have a digital bill of rights, not say, oh,
yeah.
America, because I do see this relativism thing, which some people
Mm,
do to defend other countries or whatever, which is to say,
mm,
okay, well, we crack down here, so therefore they do it, it's fine. No, I would say put it the kind of other way around, which is like it's being limited here, so we should protect it more, if we
mm.
claim to care about it. So it's like the solution
Yeah.
is not like, well, let's have a party censor everybody, because I think, frankly, a lot of people
Mm,
are scared of communists because of what communists did when they were in power. Whole lot of censoring. And it's true, not all of it was necessary. Some of it you could say was excusable. A lot of it wasn't. The temporary dictatorship
yeah.
became a permanent one, party dictatorship, but still. And like, just saying, people are scared of that shit. And I think
Oh, yeah.
it should be, you're about the aesthetics. You do that well. I'm speaking for the
Uh-huh.
audience who might be listening and be like, rah, 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 Soviet Union. Okay. Like
Uh,
aesthetics, they're gonna scare the shit out of people if like people think that that's what you're gonna do in power. So it's like I think
oh,
be
sure.
about like
Yeah.
the digital bill of rights, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. And like that's the type of thing where inherently, if corporate power was curtailed, where they couldn't pull that shit, then inherently you're going to have a greater access to free speech than you have right now. At least in theory, right? If it's bad now because corporations limit the power of corporations, it should get better, right? So that's a good thing. And I
Yeah,
think
not
you're
unless you
right.
just transferred all that state power. It's all
Sure.
state
Yeah,
power that
which I don't think is likely to happen in the United States, at
right.
least in the
That's another thing.
foreseeable
Like a
future.
lot of the Soviet style systems, it's not only like not
Yeah.
that desirable for America, it's just not possible.
It's also outdated. Like, they were using the technology they had at the time, like stuff like that. Like, oh, they actually had to run a briefcase to somebody to, there are so many tools we have at our disposal now that previous projects, socialist or not, did not have access to. So, like, if you wanted to get into cybernetic planning, stuff like that Chile tried, and they did a pretty good job, but obviously it didn't work out. If you
They
do
also
that
have
with
more
21st century.
they also have more
Mm,
capability to censor way more than ever before.
True. Very true.
As
Yeah. There are pluses and minuses to all this stuff. Like technology, it should be like a neutral thing in theory. It's just how it's used.
I just
But you're right in
I'm
saying,
critical of the state. We should be very, very not just the capital state,
oh
state in
yeah,
general. This is where I
yeah,
like about the anarchists is the criticism of the state. I don't agree with their conclusions because I think it's unrealistic, totally
yeah, it's
unrealistic.
utopian.
But it's like
However,
I think we should
yeah,
absolutely even a dictatorship of the proletariat, whatever name, whatever
yeah.
party, always the state that is too powerful can be used in ways that are
If it doesn't serve the people, what's the point, right? Then that's bullshit, right? It's just if that is the goal of a state is to serve the people. If it doesn't do that, then it needs to go. And I think that's something that people are, if you can't get dogmatically attached to the idea of a state, which I think any reasonable reading of communist theory would lead you to the conclusion that eventually we don't want a state at all, right? And
that's
it's
actually
just,
where I think communist theory is the weakest
you
on
know,
the state. Yeah. Yeah.
maybe I guess an argument could be made for that, sure.
Yeah, I
But
mean, like, let's be honest. Let's be totally honest here. Like the Marxist solution, Marxists have a very good theory of the capital of the state, but
mhm.
not of what will happen to the state under communism. Like, let's
Bro, you're not a fan of the withering away? You're not a withering away head?
deal with it later. That's basically what we say. We say, we'll deal with it later, guys. Like,
Yeah.
and anarchists are right to criticize that. That's the thing. Like, I don't think anarchists are realistic, but look, this is the thing. I think there's wisdom in the liberal tradition, like the classical liberal tradition,
Mm.
in the principle of limiting power and checks and balances. I think we need that, but for a socialist state, for a socialist purpose, this is kind of the
Yeah.
esoteric message of a lot of my videos.
Real heterodox Marxist
My
hours.
separation of powers video, all that, I'm trying to like critique the existing one we have. Say it's both. Like
Sure.
these principles
Yeah.
aren't bad in theory. These things are
Mhm.
actually very good. It's just for what? For who?
Yeah. To what end? Yeah. For whom?
And you always need
Yeah.
power because it's like Lenin himself realizes, I want to say, Lenin's
Mm.
last writing, which was, his last major writing, was, better, fewer, but better. And his thing he
Mhm.
says about the state is not good. He says, our state
Mhm.
is not much better at all than the fucking czarist state. It's
Mhm.
horrible. It's wretched. It's just, oppressive. And it's, we gotta worry about like this thing getting too powerful. Let's be honest. His fear,
To some extent. To some
large
extent. Yeah.
extent, large extent,
Mm.
I think it's good because
But yet.
you also know what the population's thinking.
Mm.
If you don't know who the reactionaries are, you just end up having suspected reactionaries.
You don't know who to shoot in the head.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Know your
No,
enemy,
but
right?
yeah. Yeah, to go back to your point about the American people not going for the no free speech thing, I think you're right. I mean, it's going to have to be at least partially a pillar of any project, socialist or not, that comes after the current, that comes after the status quo. Whatever system comes next, whether it's social democracy, whether it's some other heinous thing that has yet to be visited upon the people. I don't. You're right in that we need to make sure that people would go for it, because if people aren't gonna bite, then you're just gonna have another like huge period of upheaval on your hands, and it's just gonna worsen conditions for everybody. So there's no one size fits all approach, and the United States is kind of a not an anomaly exactly, but it's kind of weird compared to a lot of the world.
Right.
I feel confident saying it's going to be different than any other past socialism if we can pull it off
Oh
in
yeah.
the United
Might
States.
even probably be different for different states.
Sure. Yeah.
Although I worry about that
Yeah.
actually. But the thing about that is like, where I do worry about like the bad things in America. I look at the South,
Mhm.
deep
Yeah.
South mostly, the deep South.
Sure. Yeah, there are some
Yeah.
there are some
That's
problems.
not to be proud of at all.
That's not,
Yeah,
yeah,
you see
the heritage not hate. Yeah. That's a
Robert
little
E. Lee.
sus. Oh my god. Yeah, that's yeah, it's we got a lot of questions for our time, and yeah, I don't know. I'm not a doomer in any case. Like I'm generally a revolution. I have revolutionary optimism, probably to a fault.
it's that we need that. We don't have a choice.
Yeah, that's. But we got an uphill battle, and that is for certain, and that's why I think going back to like the media production stuff, I would encourage anybody who is even remotely interested in getting into producing, whether you want to call it propaganda, whether you want to call it educational videos, whatever, just get involved in the left media landscape. The more voices we have, the better. And we're never going to have the funding of the right, but it's not hard to get started. Like your phone shoots great video these days. You need a little $20 light, things like that. I know I'm personally happy. I've incubated a lot of channels in my time who people just email me and we'll go back and forth for months helping them get set up and do their thing. So, dear listener, if that's you, send me an email at secondthoughtchannel@gmail.com and I'd be happy to get you started. But yeah, that's my message is, do good stuff with camera and light. and try your best to
The
push for
reading.
a brighter. Yeah, and the reading, please. Yeah, it's for I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the United States like education system or what, but I had the joy of reading beaten out of me for years. And then it wasn't until after I graduated college that I started reading properly again. I'm like, wow, reading is so cool. It is
Easier than
so
ever now
good for
too.
you.
You got
Yeah, you can.
audiobooks, you got
Yeah.
all these internet services, you can get them for which I
Mhm.
would never acknowledge because we're law-abiding citizens.
Yeah.
But
Don't do
I
that.
never do that.
But
But
you.
it's so easy to learn.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's cool. It's fun. It's learning is good. We should never stop learning. But yeah. All right, Bucko. I gotta go. It's just about my daughter's bedtime.
Oh,
But
great. I was gonna ask
it's been
one more
real.
question.
What you got? All right, what you got?
Okay, one more question. Because we got to the back room questions way before I intended to, but it was just naturally going there. I think I really like
Yeah.
long form discussion because it really brings out
Mhm.
like the interesting shit in
Yeah.
discussion. I think I really like it. But the one question that is more actually, to be honest, of my personal interest probably in the audience, but they
Mm.
could probably learn from it too, especially based on what you just said. How the fuck are you
Mm.
so productive? Okay, so what is your daily routine and how are you
Yeah.
so productive? Because like you're just a machine, man. Like you just make videos weekly, or it's bi-weekly now, but still you do like 3 channels. So
Part of it is just the way I was trained. I know media stuff inside and out. I know exactly how long it'll take to pull off every project, stuff like that.
your routine.
Um,
Actually, I
yeah,
want to
so
know your routine, like your literal, like what does a second thought day look like?
oh, sure,
A
yeah.
work day.
So first things first, I wake up, I spend probably about half an hour scrolling. I would say doom scrolling, but it's not doom scrolling. I'm making sure I am up to date on all news that is relevant to my channel. So I'll scroll Twitter and stuff like that. Get up, check my Notion to-do list, which Notion is the only thing that keeps me on track because I'm very scatterbrained. So I have my whole production system designed in Notion, which is like upcoming projects, the status of each project, who's assigned what, when it's going live, like whether it's a Patreon read, whatever, when I need to shoot things. So that keeps it very easy for me to have multiple balls in the air at once. So that way, say Monday, I could work a little bit on second thought, first thought, deprogram, and by the end of the week, I've got a ton of content done or in the can, or at least handed off to whoever needs to do it. Part of it's also that I've expanded the team. Like I don't work alone anymore, and that is really helpful. Like I've got a creative director named Andrew who does all the motion design stuff for second thought, which I'm terrible at and I don't enjoy doing, and he's a genius with that stuff. So usually the day will consist of a call, like a check-in call with people, writer and motion design, editing, stuff like that. We go over the projects that are in the works, what needs doing. Let me see if I've got an example day here for you. I don't know if this will be of interest.
Does Notion use AI to like organize your shit? Is that
No, they've got
what's
they
the difference
added
between
some.
Apple Notes? That's kind of what I want to know. Because like I want to be
Uh,
sold as to whether I should finally get Notion.
no, Notion's cool. Like you can just, it's pretty blank slate. It's very intimidating when you first open it, but like it's project and collaboration based. So like I don't know if you can share Apple Notes. I think you can. But anyway, it's just to me it feels a little bit more professional. And I've got a bunch of different pages, and I've seen people do some amazing builds with Notion, like one for documentary filmmaking I was just looking at. They had everything from like the client side where the clients can only view a couple of the items and then the team can view the rest of them. And there's a whole database of stuff. like a shot board, like a shot list, a mood board, all these things, locations. It can submit forms to people who then fill them out, and then it fills all the relevant information across the Notion thing. Hard to describe, but it's like, it's such a blank slate and it has so many functions that it can be tailored to almost any use case, which is why I really like it. But like for me, on Monday, I went on and did or inserted mid-roll ads for a first thought video. I uploaded a second thought video to Means TV, did social posts for a first thought that went live, and then I touched base with the sponsor guy for first thought. Then I made sure I got a comped Means account for my team. Then I worked with my wife Kelsey to fix some editor invoices. We're working on trialing some new editors for first thought. Then I had a Deprogram recording. Then we had a patron chat for Deprogram patrons. Like little things like that. So it adds up. It's a bunch of little things per day, where it's like none of them take a particularly long amount of time or an inordinate amount of effort, because I break them up in such a way that I'm always doing something usually throughout the day, but I'm never like burned out. It's always a little task. I'm like, okay, that one's done. Next thing. Okay, this isn't second thought. Oh, this is something different. That's fun. Knock it out. That's pretty much it. Like that's just compartmentalizing and breaking it up into bite-sized pieces for all the different projects. But part of it is teamwork. Like I don't do anything alone anymore. Second thought, I've got 2 teammates. Deprogram and first thought, I've got Hakeem and Ugopnik. So it's all a team effort these days, which makes the lift so much lighter.
And you have a daughter, man. That's like...
And I have a daughter.
Congrats.
That is the big time sink. Thank you.
Yeah, and I
Thank
know
you.
you gotta go because of that. But yeah, I enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for coming on, and I always enjoy collaborating with you. Sure, we'll do that again. We'll do the back room at a different...
Ooh, let's do it.
Yeah, just like shoot the shit about like life in general. Yeah.
My stupid ass thought this was the back rooms, and so that's why I brought up those names I shouldn't have brought up.
My only hope is that when enough people become pessimists, then out of despair somebody maybe does something. But you know why I also like to be a pessimist? Because it's the only way to have a nice life. If you're an optimist, then always bad things happen and you are always disappointed. When you are a pessimist, then you look around, okay, there are bad, but from time to time something nice happens and you are, as a pessimist, you are a little bit glad all the time, no?
You are listening to One Dime Radio. Become a patron at patreon.com/onedime to support the show and get access to extra